Good afternoon, everybody. We'll just leave it a couple of moments to make sure that everyone has a chance to get in before we get started. So good afternoon and welcome to the second webinar in a series organised by Liberty Produce and Writtle University College and sponsored by ERA. Writtle and Liberty Produce have joined forces to bring together stakeholders from across our community for this new webinar series. Both believe that collaboration is a vital component in tackling the challenges that our sector is facing. This series is intended as a starting point for some fruitful discussions and further collaborations, and both Writtle and Liberty are dedicated to the development of sustainable agricultural practices and decided to partner together in this series due to their core values of knowledge sharing. They really would welcome further conversations and engagements from any attendees, and you can contact both through their websites. So I'm Fiona Rust, I am from Agri-TechE, and I will be chairing our session this afternoon. A little bit about Agri-TechE. We are a business-focused membership organisation and we're trying to support the growth of a world-leading network of innovative farmers, producers, scientists, technologists and entrepreneurs who all share a vision of increasing productivity, profitability and sustainability of agriculture. So together we're trying to help turn challenges into business opportunities and facilitate mutually beneficial collaboration. So today we are going to be examining food production systems and identifying some of the skills gaps. So why is now an important time to have this discussion? Over the last year, the importance of food production and our supply chains in the UK have well and truly been highlighted through the challenges posed by the coronavirus pandemic and by Brexit. Agriculture is ever changing and the opportunities are being driven by research and technology as well as changing consumer trends. And these are leading to new ways of thinking, working and growing. So what challenges does this pose us? How can the way in which the sector works ensure that we support this progression, and how do we go about ensuring we have the skilled workforce that we need? So before I introduce you to our excellent speakers, I would like you to get involved with this webinar. So I would like to launch a poll, and the question is, what is the biggest challenge facing UK food production in the future? Just going to give you a few moments to make your choice. So I can see lots of people currently voting. Skill shortages is up there at the top for the time being. Swapping between skills and climate change and environmental concerns. Okay, I think we can leave the poll there if possible. Lovely, thank you. So I am really excited to be joined by two excellent speakers this afternoon. We have Steven Winterbottom, Managing Director of Tozer Seeds, and Dan Hewitt, who is Head of Agriculture and Sustainability at Kettle Chips. If I can remind you, if you have any questions to ask of our speakers, please do use the question box on your screens, and I will be delivering those to the speakers as we go through. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Steve, please.
Good afternoon. You have to excuse me because this is new to me and we haven't set this room up, so I can't look at you, I've got to read, but excuse that anyway. Perhaps I could have the first slide, please. A.L. Tozer Limited, as a company, as it was known then, was founded in Cobham, Surrey in the early 1940s as part of a war effort when the government had to secure UK food production. Then as now, much of the UK's food was imported from overseas. This included seeds, which were primarily grown in countries with warmer, drier climates than the UK. With many of the European seed production areas either behind enemy lines or about to be invaded, and those production areas further afield affected by blockade, seed companies were encouraged to set up or increase homegrown seed production. Primarily, this took place in the sunnier and drier southeastern and eastern counties. So you could say that our company was actually born out of sustainability nearly 80 years ago. 80 years later, Tozer Seeds is still based in Cobham, but in the intervening years, the sleepy rural Surrey village is now at the heart of stockbroker belt. With the average property price in Cobham currently standing at £1.2 million, our location amongst the billionaires and millionaires is not exactly conducive to attracting and retaining those with agricultural and horticultural skill sets. As a seed company, our staffing requirements are very diverse, from PhD level plant breeders and researchers, their support staff, technical sales, product development, office support, and an entire raft of agronomic staff. Indeed, we have to contend with the Grand Canyon of skill gaps, and increasingly over the last 40 years or so, we have had to train many of our staff from scratch. Next slide, please. Research and development and breeding is the lifeblood of our business, and staffing this highly technical and fast evolving area has always been a challenge. But we have a few tricks up our sleeve, one being our annual requirement for part-time pollination staff. Basically, we need people to hand pollinate brassica breeding lines in the early spring. Frequently, something is seen in these human bees. Excuse me for a second. Frequently, something is seen in these human bees who then graduate to full-time roles and with training acquire skills and become valuable members of our team. Others arrive from universities, from other seed companies or science-based industries where the skill sets are transferable. Next slide, please. We work closely with many universities and technology centres, sponsoring research and development and mutually benefiting from the interaction. Next slide, please. On the agronomic side of our business, the demise of agricultural horticultural colleges in the UK over the last 20 years has created a huge skill gap at all levels. The OND, HND courses traditionally provided the horticulture industry with a valuable source of practically trained technicians. Such a ready-to-go, straight-out-of-the-box staffing resource no longer exists. In an increasingly technology-driven world, we patently need to train a new generation of horticultural technicians that equally understand the crops and the complex systems in which they're grown. We need to market the benefits of a career in our fascinating high-tech and sustainable industry, whether that be growing crops in traditional systems, high-tech glasshouses, vertical farming units, or in support industries such as plant breeding. Whatever our discipline, our need for highly trained and motivated staff binds us together. And the education system needs to rise to the challenge by creating interesting and relevant courses to meet the demands of a fast-changing industry. With many traditional industries in decline, and investment in sustainable agriculture at an all-time high, surely there must be a huge opportunity to retrain and utilise the available workforce. But to make the most of this opportunity, industry and educational institutes must work together. New slide, please. What we do, we as a company are driven by our customers' requirements. This requires teamwork between our customer-facing sales and PD staff and the R&D and breeding teams. Apart from continuing to develop and refine existing species, we are constantly looking at new products to bring to market. Food is fashion and consumers love new things. Next slide, please. A recent example of food imitating fashion is Wild Rocket. As the name suggests, until relatively recently, wild rocket was a Mediterranean weed, traditionally gathered from the wild and used as a salad item. In its natural form, wild rocket has a very prostrate habit and readily bolts. Our breeders started working with wild rocket approximately 20 years ago, when bagged salads were in their infancy and the consumer was demanding more interesting products to spice up the blends. Initially, we endeavoured to make wild rocket more erect, basically get it upright so it could be machine harvested. At the same time, we worked on slowing down bolting in order to make the product easier to grow and more commercially viable. Throughout the process, the breeding team were working with sales and PD colleagues and our customers to trial and hone the product. The result was the first commercial wild rocket variety Voyager, a Mediterranean staple bred in the stockbroker belt of Surrey. Perhaps we should have named it Abramovich after one of our billionaire neighbours. Voyager was a vanguard variety that helped establish wild rocket as a major salad item, now second only to spinach as a bagged product. Fast forwarding, we now have global sales for wild rocket and have developed a range of varieties, many featuring mildew resistance and adapted to markets as far-ranging as Australia and the United States. Wild rocket, once a weed, is now a cornerstone product for Tozer Seeds and an example of how teamwork can identify and develop a niche line into a major commodity. Next slide, please. A vision for the future. And next slide as well, please. Undoubtedly, sustainability will be the watchword, and a carbon neutral future is now within our grasp. Flying and trucking produce thousands of miles will, for a large part, be replaced by local production and in sustainably powered and LED lit glasshouses and vertical farming systems located close to markets to further reduce the carbon footprint. These sealed environment systems will reduce or eliminate pesticide inputs, and the optimised conditions will speed up production. Our role will be to breed new varieties and adapt existing ones to flourish in these optimised conditions. New slide, please. New speed breeding techniques will enable us to cut short the plant generation time, facilitating faster breeding and reducing inputs. CRISPR gene editing technology will also be a tool in our box to speed up plant breeding by editing single genes of interest, for example, drought tolerance or pathogen resistance, whilst not introducing any undesirable genes. We are currently working with the University of York to develop a technique to use this technology on celery, parsnips, lettuce and cucurbits. Gene editing is not GMO, as it does not involve the introduction of foreign genetic material from different species or organisms. It is simply an efficient process to cut DNA at a specific location and alter the arrangement of base pairs to introduce desirable traits. Gene editing can therefore hugely enhance sustainability by allowing the development of crops that grow in challenging environmental conditions, potentially reducing inputs such as chemicals, fertiliser and water. Food will continue to be driven by fashion, and the demand that interesting nutritional new products will continue to challenge our team, a challenge that we relish. Next slide, please. We're at the dawn of a new agricultural, horticultural revolution, but to mutually benefit, we must work together. And new slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve. So just to remind our audience, if anybody's got any questions that would like to ask Stephen before we move on to Dan, now's your chance to put them in the question box. Really interesting, Stephen, to hear how you talk about food as fashion and kind of that ever-changing need from our consumers, but the fact that that's an exciting challenge for yourselves rather than a daunting one. How do you think we can harness this generation who are coming through, who are very aware about their global impact and sustainability, to try and ensure that we do have those skills for food production moving forward?
Well, I think the interest is there, almost certainly. I mean, if you look at the number of programs there are on the TV about food and food production, you know, recently, you know, we work with a guy that supplies Rick Stein, for instance, and recently Rick Stein did a series, and the little producer that works with Rick Stein, supplying his restaurants with all sorts of novel products, many of which we supply. And if we've got anything wild and wacky that we're trying to sort of product develop and see whether it works, we give it to this guy who then test drives it with the Rick Stein restaurants and all of the other sort of high-end restaurants that are in Cornwall. But the programme that was on recently effectively meant that much of the produce and products featured and sold out. I mean, for instance, there was a cheese manufacturer who was producing cheese, sort of bespoke cheeses in Cornwall, and his production's now sold out for the next 3 years, all from appearing for a few minutes on a Rick Stein programme. But you know, you've got that, you've got Country File, all sorts of programs that sort of focus on an agricultural lifestyle. And I think even Brexit may drive people in this direction as people move and migrate away from cities and maybe are looking for changes. And you know, as I've sort of said in my speech, at the moment we're going to have an absolute dearth of unemployed people, particularly from retail. You know, many of them have got skill sets that I think could be repurposed and used for, vertical farming systems, the new greenhouse jobs that are evolving. I mean, I don't think that staffing is going to be quite the problem that it has been in the future, but training is going to be required, and that's where currently I see us falling short. Here we have to basically train most of our staff from absolute scratch because they're not available off the shelf.
So really utilising that kind of broader marketing, if that's Country File or TV programmes, to highlight the growing and the agriculture that's happening, and hope that kind of positive marketing of the sector then kind of creates an interest in people to come into it as a career choice. Thank you very much, Stephen. I'm now going to hand over to Dan from Kettle Chips. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Video, please.
We're third-generation farmers based in North Norfolk near Cromer. We're now currently part of the Kettle Grower Group, supplying just under 1,000 acres of potatoes. Being 25 miles away from the factory was a real incentive for us to get involved. From field to farm, we have the harvesting process transported in trailer and onto the reception hopper, which we call the grader, where we have a presentation table where we have 6 people sorting through the potatoes. A good potato, right length, right size, your perfect spud ideally.
When the potatoes come through, they arrive to our wet end. The wet end is called the wet end because first of all they go through a destoner, which uses water to pump through. Next they go through to the drum washer, again, which uses water. After that, they go through to a dewooder, where anything that floats, straw and everything is taken out. Once they leave the wet end, they are then sent through to our cook rooms, where they are cooked in sunflower oil at 151 degrees. The cooks are actually looking at every single load to see whether they're perfect enough to put into a bag of kettle chips. We are still using the same type of rake that our founder first started with. We are a hand-cooked business, and that's the way we've always done it. We use vibrating conveyors because it's the best way of us moving kettle chips without causing any breakage. Our people on the inspection line are trained to look for the perfect golden chip, and they will reject anything that doesn't meet our standards. They are then ready to be seasoned.
We use real food here at Kettle because it creates the best flavour. It has a depth, it has a richness, it has all of the flavour qualities that you want. They're tumbled with the seasoning, and then they move on for weighing and packaging.
we have a machine minder looking after every single machine. They look after the bags, make sure they are sealed and the correct amount of chips go into the bags. They are put into a bags with a small amount of air to avoid any breakage, and they'll be ready to be packed. We have people packing, putting the correct amount of bags into a box, then they are sent through to our stacking area, ready to be packed and sent out to customers. All my time that I've been here, things have changed and we do use more technology, but we still use the same process and we still have people hand cooking to get the perfect kettle chip.
Thank you. First slide, please. Hi, a short introduction. My name is Dan Hewitt, Head of Agriculture and Sustainability for Kettle Foods, and also Chair to the Board of Governors at Rittle. I thought I'd start with the video because I think it gave a really good overview of what Kettle is all about, local food production, and colleagues and partners in the supply chain and the diverse opportunities that lie within our industry. It's not just about growing, as Steven would say, from a breeding all the way through to a bag of chips. There is an immense industry behind that. So Kettle Foods, been in the UK for around just over 34 years now, using 60,000 tonnes of potatoes. And for a small Norwich business, we're supplying 27 countries. So quite an international success as a brand. Our consumers are changing. The way that we do business is changing, and the way that we grow our crops is changing. And that's why you are here this afternoon with intrigue and interest to find out what that actually feels like. So I'm going to take you through some slides, and I've taken some view from high-end science, from recruiters, and a small presentation from a journey that I started back in 2016. Okay, next slide, please. I think at Kettle Foods, we think there's going to be there's 5 pillars about the future of food. And as we say, I do think they are all inexorably linked. Next slide, please. Our 5 pillars, not in order or any particular order, but you can see that the 5 pillars are diverse in some respects. Our consumers, the people that buy our products, have an expectation of what we do and how we do that on a day-to-day basis. So we have to listen to our consumers, else they will not buy our products. So it's a foregone conclusion with our consumers that they expect us to act sustainably in everything that we do, and have those priorities, sustainability priorities. The expectations are becoming, as the slide says, more demanding year on year. And equally, I think it's probably right to say that it's expected at the same price. Our customers are incredibly ambitious about commitments that they make to our consumers. And I would say that most customers have their own set of priorities. Our employees, why are they a pillar? They're critically important to that, and it goes beyond our employees. It goes beyond, far beyond that, with our suppliers and the people that we work very closely with. And investors, significant investment out there for companies that are acting and being sustainable in their approach to the way that they do business. And of course, our community is vitally important to us. We expect that we are a good neighbour, and do good in everything that we do within our local community and further afield. Thank you. Next slide. I tried to scope out what is the next 10 years for me, my colleagues, our company, our suppliers, and our brand. Without doubt, we're going to see massive changes in the agricultural sector. We've got to rise to the challenge of increasing populations, increasing temperatures, as we're finding, very volatile and increasing commodity prices, it's all increasing demand on available land resource. Lack of engaged labour. This is a major concern that we have in our industry. We have a massive skill shortage, a skill gap, and a labour requirement. The last figure I heard was over 60,000 people are required. A lack of skills, and how are we going to manage them? I've put the little COVID guy to the right of the screen. That has sideswept everyone. You wouldn't have believed just over 12 months ago that the effect this was going to have. Next slide, please. I engaged the John Innes Centre. I've taken some text from Dr. Jonathan Clark, who I work very closely with. Science is one of the pathways to our future. I'm not going to read it out. I'm going to allow you a moment or two just to read a couple of questions that I put to John and his response. Overall, I think you can see the investment, tenfold investment of money coming into the agri-tech sector is a key point. So there is an appetite out there for investment into technology and forward-looking businesses, and within that, the innovation. So I'm a real believer in you have to have adversity within your discipline to tease out innovation. Okay, thank you. I think we'll move to the next slide. Okay, if you could run this, please. This is Max McGilwray, CEO of Red Fox and also Beanstalk Global, and I asked him to give us an update on skills and his view.
Hello, welcome to myself, Max McGilvray. You just caught me before I do a broadcast to India, would you believe, to one of the largest grape producers in India for part of our Beanstalk series. If you're not aware of Beanstalk, have a look at our website. I also am a founder of Red Fox Executive Selection, which is an executive recruitment company in the ag and the fresh produce sectors. So that's enough avatar about me. Question I've been asked, what do you see as the challenges for the next 5 to 10 years and the opportunities that are here today? Challenges. The challenges are a really interesting one. I'd say that there's two elements pre-COVID that I would flag up as big challenges: industry, competition, and money. So what do I mean by that? I've spoken to so many. Let's look at agricultural machinery manufacturers as a real case in point. The likes of Class. So I'm based in Suffolk. We've got Class headquarters down the road. They've always bemoaned the fact that they have a real problem gaining either apprenticeships or new individuals to come into their business, because ultimately they're not deemed to be sexy enough as a sector, and also they haven't got the ability to pay what other sectors have got. So there's industry competition. It always annoys me that every year the likes of the engineering sectors come out with a big power drive of a promotional campaign, and it's all over the press, all over the BBC, about why people should get involved in engineering. And we don't see that from the agriculture and fresh produce sectors, because we don't have the money or the might or the know-how to how to promote that. So that's number one, industry competition. And then number two, I've referred to it, money, that some of the other roles that are out there for younger individuals, they might get a better income rather than agriculture. So that's the negatives. Let's look at COVID. COVID is actually going to give us a positive in this sector. Why do I say that? The two opportunities I see post-COVID for the next 5 years is it's going to be in a very attractive sector to work in, and it's doing good. One thing that we picked up with the younger generation is that they want to get involved with a business that's really enjoyable and it's got real purpose. And what is but a better business to be involved in, and one that's growing stuff that's going to do us all good, like agricultural businesses or fresh produce companies, rather than working for, I don't know, telecommunications company. And so we're getting this big steer, just to emphasize that younger people want to get involved with businesses that are doing good, enjoyable, where they can learn and learn for the long term. So we're picking up that there's a number of younger individuals who want to take that career direction to get involved in sectors that they can feel that they're doing good. So doing good, people, planet, profit. It is the mantra that we're hearing time and time again. Or as a broadcast I did last night with America, the guy had a backdrop of people, produce, planet. So we're definitely seeing that there's an upside. What needs to be done through the agricultural institutions to really drive for the training and development side that's on offer, especially for some of the new sectors that are coming through, like the vertical farming, so that younger people can see that there's a real interest to be had by being aligned to those sectors. So good on the likes of Rittle to looking to make a change. Make sure you're big, proud and noisy to get people who are non-related in agriculture and food into the likes of Rittle, so we can see them coming through the system. And just a final point to wrap up, I've got a bit of annoyance with some of the younger individuals I deal with. It's not so much lack of ambition, because they have, as we've just described, but it's lack of ambition to travel. There are so many opportunities globally, whether it be blueberries in Peru, whether it be cherries in Canada, whether it be avocados in South Africa, whether it be cotton in Australia. There is more to be had than sitting on a dairy farm in Derbyshire. No offense to a dairy farm in Derbyshire. But if those individuals actually hopped on a plane, they would have such a whale of a time. They would have the horizons broadened, and they would come back to the UK as even better individuals, or they might find careers out there. Hope that helps. Be well, keep safe.
Thanks, Max. I think the thing that resonates most from Max's soundbite there is opportunity. I spoke to Max 12 months ago and asked about the opportunities that were available in the vertical farming sector. And Max is very tuned into the vertical farming sector. And he had opportunities, very significant opportunities in the Middle East, the Far East, and over in the US, in California. And that was a year ago. And his book continues to fill. So the opportunities abound. Okay, I'm going to use the case study of Almeria. Not to beat Almeria up and the Spanish up, because actually what they're doing is they're feeding a need, but I just see this as a complete and utter opportunity for UK agriculture, horticulture. So Almeria, 135 square miles of polytunnel production, putting as it says, 1.6 million tons of fresh produce into the European marketplaces, and we're importing about 11% of that. So you can imagine the CO2 impact of road freighting fresh produce to us when we want a cucumber or tomatoes in our supermarket in November, December, January, and February. So that's where they are. They're feeding a need. So next slide, please, if I could. So the white bit isn't snow. That's actually polytunnels. So when I started my journey in vertical farming in 2016, it looked like it was mission impossible, because how could you possibly have an impact environmentally? Too costly, too much energy, and little demand, I think, would be where I would have summarized it back in 2016, but we were pioneering. And then I saw this and went, that's impact, and that impact is just feeding our requirement for fresh produce. Next slide, please. What does that look like? I'm sure many of you will have seen this slide before. This is Earth's required to feed population diets. So you can see the good old US of A at the top there. We need 5 Earths. If we were all to eat an American diet, we would need 5 like planets to be able to consume that diet. We're sitting probably somewhere around just over the middle, and all the way back down to India, where on the diets that the population have today, they wouldn't even need a full Earth. And I find that quite astounding. This is the job we have to do in industry to rise to this challenge as the population continues to grow and diets become more affluent, if you will. It's a crazy situation for us to consider. Next slide, please. Yeah, we need some solutions, guys. We need to jump to this, and pretty quickly. We have set ourselves all sorts of challenges around agriculture, land, and the timelines around being carbon neutral, less than 10 years now. And this is all happening quite quickly. So we were up agriculturalists back somewhere between 12 and 23,000 years ago, and guess what? Very little's actually changed since then. It's all happened in the last 50 or 60 years. So if everything's happened in 50 years in the last 23,000, what's the next 50 going to look like? Okay, next slide, please.
Just 1 minute, Dan, please.
Sure. Okay, very quickly. GrowPod. This was my idea, my concept of can I grow root crops aeroponically and brand them as air grown. So next slide, please. Exactly what it is. It's an advisory business that has been there, done it, and spent the cash. Next slide, please. That's what a GrowPod looked like. Stackable, so transmit container. We built them by hand to prove the concept. Next slide, please. And we did it. So those red potatoes went to Marks and Spencer's, to the innovation chef to make crisps, and we delivered to London on a courier. You'll see some broccoli and kale, healthy root systems. So we actually did it with very little knowledge and just a private budget. Okay, next slide, please. That's the stat. We realized very quickly that we could grow 5 potato crops in those pods in one season. Current UK acreage, if you could scale that up, we could grow the 118,000 hectares grown in field today in just a little over 5,500 hectares of vertical farming. Staggering reductions in everything, no chemistry required. So a real possibility here, and that's just a private enterprise. Okay, I think we're there. Next slide. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Any questions?
Lovely. Thank you very much, Dan. So if I could invite Steven back so we can cut straight into some questions. It'd be really interesting to get both of your perspectives on some of these. So we've got lots of questions coming through, so I'll do my best to ask as many as we can. So one was directed to Steve, but I think Dan, you'll also have something to say about this. Someone has asked, do you ever see controlled environment production to produce more than just leafy greens, which Dan, you've obviously just touched on, but if we also can kind of bring that to the skills side of things, how do we start to ensure that we have the right skills for that potential change in agriculture? Stephen, would you like to give us an answer first?
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously can comment on how we train people and we adapt skills here. But, as I said in my talk, I think we need to, talk to RITL and other education establishments and start putting together relevant courses. I mean, I came through the sort of HND process where, you spent time prior to going to college working in the industry, then you did a sandwich year, and then by the time you were finished, you'd worked in industry and you'd done the academic bit as well. And, effectively, those courses turned out staff that, I'm not saying that they were, completely trained on leaving college, but basically most of my contemporaries could be put to work straight away. We were trained in the skill sets of the time. We need to develop courses to reflect the new skill sets. So if it's vertical farming or high-tech greenhouse production, then that's what colleges need to do. They need to invest in that technology as well. Maybe they need to be looking at Dan's grow pods and, equipping greenhouses with LED lights and the new technology.
Dan, anything to add?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Steve and I work hand in hand on this. Consumers tell us what they need, and then we rise to that challenge. So Steve works with high-end science to then deliver products to me to grow on. And I think that there's two things in that question. I've proven that you can grow more than leafy greens, and there are far larger businesses today. We're now playing catch up, guys. The UK is actually in a lag. The Californians are already doing it. The Middle East are absolutely flying. So we have some work to do. And I think it's really interesting that Max has opportunities from a skill perspective to supply those needs elsewhere. So we need to play catch up. These systems, and there's some fantastic systems out there, can absolutely adapt and stretch. I think I've written it down. Agriculture, we don't need tractor drivers. We've got to think far more than that. We actually want pilots for rocket ships, and that's what RITL needs to do.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to what Stephen was saying earlier about kind of getting it out to the mainstream, isn't it, and making people realise what actually goes into food production. And if we touch on the controlled environment, that's everything from the sensors, isn't it? That's the lighting, that's the chemical, or not the chemicals, but aeroponically, what is being put through those buildings. So we need to do a big PR stunt for agriculture. So I think that's kind of is a really key point, isn't it? I think Max touched on this, and you've both also touched on it about that mix of skills and knowledge as well. So how do apprenticeships fall into this? Are apprenticeships in the UK a pathway for growers and breeders of the future? How can we compete against other industries who, as Max say, make it look a bit sexier than maybe agriculture does? Dan, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, look, I'm a passionate advocate of apprenticeships. I think from my perspective, we have to think differently as well, because today, I think everyone is in this sector thinking about it, but everyone's thinking about what the machinery looks like rather than how you're going to grow. So I think apprenticeships working through Hort and Ag, and this is going to be a hybrid because it's neither and it's both, if that makes sense. So I'm really keen, passionate advocate. We have to get people into jobs, and if that's part learning, part apprenticeship, then so be it. My hands up, waving, going yes. And we at Kettle Foods absolutely take our fair share and more of apprentices.
Yeah. Stephen, your thoughts?
No, I entirely agree. I mean, in many respects, you know, the way that we have had to train staff because they weren't available, you know, they are apprenticeships of a type, because we've had to, you know, train people from scratch. And, you know, some people wouldn't even know a root from a leaf, you know, that type of, you know, from the start to the finish. And, you know, somebody said earlier that we need to advertise the fact that this is an exciting high-tech industry. I mean, when I joined Tozer, our market was the Thames Valley, which has disappeared. Now 70% of our sales are somewhere else in the world. We have a subsidiary in California. We have a subsidiary in Murcia. We're just starting another subsidiary in Holland, and our staff travel the globe. There's not a country that grows vegetables that we don't go to, and you know, we've got people on the road in sales positions, in product development, breeding, and we travel globally. So you know, I would say that, you know, there already is an exciting high-tech industry there. We just need to make people aware of it, and I think that's where we're failing. And you know, we are, you know, if you look at the changes that are coming down the line, particularly with, you know, reducing CO2 emissions and such like. I mean, we're going to be forced into vertical farming systems, you know, adapting greenhouses, and we won't have the staff to run them, because traditionally our staff have all been sort of procured from Eastern Europe in recent times. And you know, patently, we should be training UK staff to do those jobs. You know, they're there. You know, and particularly, as I said, post this pandemic, people are going to be looking for new challenges and new jobs to try, and you know, we've got those, and they can be available in abundance if we develop these businesses to meet the need.
So I think what we're saying is now is a really good opportunity for agriculture and horticulture to make the point, isn't it, that there are careers there. They're exciting careers, and it's in a sector which is ever changing and will continue to change, and that's a really exciting prospect. So I suppose what's coming out of this are the two main points, aren't they? We need to be better at marketing our sector, but we also need to be better at collaborating as well. 33% of people in the poll said skills shortage and upskilling training gap was the biggest challenge, but yet we're all here talking about it because it's not quite happening yet. So we've touched back on that collaboration piece, that actually that is key. Working together is how we're going to ensure that we start to move forward. So how do we encourage businesses then to begin to engage more with education institutions? We can't just say, yes, education is the key and they're the ones that have got to deal with it. Ultimately, us in industry have got to make that link. So how do we go about that? What is going to be that kind of catalyst to move us forward, do we think? That's Dan, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, hey, look, I'm a living example of this. I work for a company that's very forward-looking and very visionary. So they donate my time to helping Rittle. And you know, I'm lucky that I'm in a business like that. Stephen is the same. He runs a business that is equally as forward-looking, and we've both got very successful businesses. And there's a reason for that. It's because we have that vision. I think that's probably where I think most businesses should engage both with science, with education, and they'll grow. Because we can walk people, apprentices and students through our factory, and I guarantee we will learn more from them than they do from us, because they will see things in our factory and our supply chains that we're probably overlooking, or come at it with a fresh pair of eyes. So I'm going to hand that same question over to Steve, I guess.
Well, you and I, Dan, talked about this quite a lot, and certainly we've talked about the need for institutions such as Rittle to invest in equipment that reflects modern production and the requirements of modern production. And I think we can all play our part here. Maybe we need some groups from industry and education to get together and actually thrash out what is required. And it's going to be a complex because what we do is completely different from what Kettle does, obviously, but in many respects we need equally sort of technology driven students going forwards to come and work in our businesses. And just keeping up with it. I mean, the old joke about having to go and get your grandson if you wanted to program your video, increasingly that's going to be the case with technology in our working environment. Gone are the days when a spade was the primary tool. We're now running our businesses with computers. It's a different world, and it's a world that should appeal to the young, because what we're doing is equally on a technology par with any other industry.
So I think we've got another question coming that's asked, how can we increase the number of people applying to Rittle and other education providers, attracting people in horticulture and agriculture, and how do we get school and college leavers? So I suppose we've just touched on that actually we need the courses. So if we look to the future, we've got the courses, but how do we actually get people onto them? What is going to be that driver, do we think? Stephen, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, and there's been some discussion recently with Rittle where effectively there appears to have been an increase in interest in these college courses. And Dan would almost certainly know more about this than I do. There was a time when just about every county in the country had an agricultural college, turning out everything from basic skill sets for horticulture and agriculture up to graduate levels. There are so few of them now that even if we were to attract, the student numbers that are going to be required, the other thing is, of course, have we got the places? Have we got those facilities available? It could get to the stage where we go from the sublime to the ridiculous, where you're encouraging people into our industry, and yet we don't have the resources to train them. That would be an interesting thing to say. I mean, I don't know whether Dan's got some views on that, because obviously you're closer to this in your role with Rittle than I am.
Yeah, look, I think with Rittle's offering of what farming is going to look like in the future, we can see that in the numbers that are coming through. We can see that with the student satisfaction survey, where they've become in the last season top university as far as students are concerned in the UK. It's enormous, but it goes back earlier than that. In my very humble opinion, we've disconnected and with food and food production and the land. We're starting to get there, and a lot of celebrity chefs have really helped that journey for us, and Country File. And my son, he's 12, he is absolutely passionate about the environment. And where's he got that passion from? TV. Yep. Mr. Attenborough telling him that we are really getting this badly wrong, and he's becoming a bit of an eco warrior and telling me what I should and shouldn't do. So it starts earlier. So I do an awful lot of work with schools through with my company about talking about food production, and engagement, and keep that going, because there's some significant businesses involved in food production, both here in the UK and across the globe. So they have the wherewithal to help promote this. The likes of McCain, a global business, multi-billion-dollar business. They do a really good job, and it's partnering with those guys and making sure that we're aligned to what industry needs. And I'm talking about Rittle now and schools, making sure that students that come through can see a really clear pathway and go, okay, I can earn a great living and have a fantastic career. Because Steve and I would both say the same thing. We've had a wonderful life so far from agriculture, and we've seen some huge changes. And I'm really quite envious of people coming into the industry now, and what changes they're gonna be part of, see and be part of. I think it's a wonderful place to be.
Absolutely, excellent. So just drawing things to a close, unfortunately. So this would be a one word or one phrase answer from both of you if possible. So if the audience has to take away one key point, one call to action away from this webinar, what would that be? What do you want them to take away? Stephen, we'll start with you, please.
Invest in education.
Lovely, nice and brief, thank you. And Dan, over to you.
I've already said it, think about rocket ships.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for your contribution. So I think as we've really shown that agriculture and horticulture have got an awful lot to offer, but there are some key things that we need to be doing to moving forward in order to ensure that we have the skilled individuals. And part of that is the marketing, utilising those key figures and also getting that enthusiasm from the next generation about their awareness of their planet and their food as well, and giving them that clear career moving forward. And also the collaboration within industry. So that is between the education, the actual businesses, as well as research as well, and making that a really nice cyclical approach. So it really is an exciting time for this discipline, and there are plenty of career opportunities, as we all well know, but that need for that interdisciplinary thinking just could not be greater than any other time. But it always comes back, I think, for all of us, that collaboration is absolutely key to our problem solving. So as we touched on earlier, this is the second webinar in this series. So there is one more to go, which we hope you'll be able to join for on the 24th of March. And that is about creating a fit for purpose workforce in a sustainable economy. So do go and book onto that now. I would like to thank our speakers, Dan and Stephen, for their contribution, as well as the team at Rittel and Liberty Produce, who are working hard behind the scenes to ensure that you can all see us from where you are at the moment. And lastly, that leaves me time to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you have found a chance to engage in this discussion further and to extend your thinking as well. So that just leaves me a little bit ahead of time. My watch must be a little bit fast, but we will leave it there with a couple of videos from our organisers. So that is Rittel and Liberty Produce. And we look forward to seeing you for the final webinar in March. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Fiona.
Stephen McMenemy reports.
Could this be the answer to feeding ever-growing populations around the world? A new facility at the James Hutton Institute uses the latest technology to grow crops inside shipping containers. The work going on here is seen as vital to help the UK maintain crop requirements for the future. But it could also be used in countries where crops consistently fail.
This model, given that it's a container-based system, can be shipped anywhere around the world. It's not reliant on the natural environment at all. It's fully self-contained. We're controlling the environment within it.
This mode of farming looks set to be a growth industry. Steven McMenemy, STV News.
The great outdoors, and even greater indoors. An education for the real world. Putting theory into practice. Smaller class numbers and supportive tutors. Highest overall for student satisfaction. Breaking new ground. Breaking the mould for almost 130 years. Around 200 open hectares outside Chelmsford. A close community that will welcome you inside. Making lifelong friends. Experiences for life. Being just 35 minutes from London, but a world away. Discover our hands-on industry-recognised courses. Putting theory to the test. Putting alumni in high places. Putting your career first. Putting science into practice. Rittel University College.